Good afternoon again, and welcome back to another week of Porterhouse Realty Talks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Today, we will be continuing our conversations around whether it be obstacle handling in a buyer side transaction or obstacle handling in listing side transactions. Last week, we had some very dynamic discussion with regards to getting buyers over that threshold when we face some challenges. And today we're going to allow that conversation to further unfold. We want for you guys to be aware that for every challenge, there are likely multiple solutions, and want to encourage you to leave no stone left unturned when it comes to finding a way to get your client across that settlement threshold and making sure to keep them encouraged along the way. And for you guys as well, we want for you to remain encouraged no matter what the obstacle is that you face. So today we're going to open up the floor as well and invite you guys, if there's anyone that has a transaction that sticks out in mind that you may say, well, this was a very challenging transaction. However, we made it to settlement. So it's a testimonial at the end of the day. If there is anything that you would like to share, Angela, if you are prepared, I would love for you to share the transaction we had talked about a couple weeks or so ago. If you're able to unmute yourself, would you share that transaction in this format? What was the challenge? What was the solution? What did you do in order to get your client to settle?
Hello.
Hello, Angela.
Hi.
How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. I know initially when we started this topic, I didn't chime in too much because I thought it was more buyer specific. But um, luckily, I'm working with some sellers at the moment. But my issue with my sellers still affects, the buyer and still getting us to closing. But I have a few actually that I talked to Jasmine about. I'll just mention one for now. But I had a listing that came up just last week. Prior to putting it on the market, there were several issues, and I think some of Realty pros might be experiencing something similar. So hopefully this is helpful. But initially, this was a property that had tenants in it. And it was quite a challenge because the house was full. It wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't well maintained, but it wasn't a very clean home. So, what I did, you have a seller who's not necessarily willing to put invest in trying to just didn't want to put much money into the home, trying to recoup as much as they could. Just going over the numbers, the comps, explaining to them if they put it on the market as is versus if they're able to make some of these repairs, clean the home, some of these improvements and the type of return it can get them. Someone who was very hesitant and didn't want to do anything with the property actually did quite a bit, from clearing out the home to painting to carpet, and then just going over with your client how to utilize resources, maybe even on a budget. But he actually got family members to assist. He agreed to pay them at the end, but we had the whole house painted, new carpet, house was professionally cleaned. And then some additional challenges we faced was odor. And I don't know if I mentioned that to you guys before, but there was a cigarette smell. Painting and cleaning hopefully was supposed to resolve the issue, and it in fact didn't. And I learned many ways on how to rectify this. However, we did get rid of the odor. That's probably for another day for me to share all the different things that we tried. But it turned out at the very last minute, we were going to shampoo the basement rug. That was the one carpet that we didn't replace. And shampooing that, it posed another problem. We now had a mildew smell that we didn't have before. And it was just because the carpet was damp. Long story short, we did get multiple offers on the property. We had a lot of negative comments because everyone wasn't quite satisfied with the way the home presented itself. But I went to the property. We did go under contract just in one weekend, went on the market Friday. We're under contract by Monday, this past Monday. I went back on Wednesday and the odor has almost completely dissipated. So what I learned in this is that I try to encourage my sellers to list a little later until we rectify that odor, because I believe we could have gotten a lot more offers, would have attracted a lot more buyers. for whatever reason, our sellers don't always want to do what we expect them. They had already delayed a week with us trying to rectify this. And I do think it could have potentially hurt the seller in that I do believe we would have gotten a lot more interest, a lot more offers. But in this case, we only needed one, and the offer they got was it was an excellent offer. So those are just a few of the challenges that we faced just in this one transaction, and exhausting all these different options. Again, going over the comps and showing them, by making the sacrifice or coming up with some creative resources, how it can in fact I would say hinder your sale, or in fact to help you to sell your home and get more money for it.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, Angela. Share with us what that property looked like. And I know you said it didn't present well, but give us a little bit more insight for those in the event that you come across a listing in this condition. We want you to know that all things are possible, so be encouraged. Tell us just a little bit about the property.
Okay, so I've taken clients to properties where maybe you have two, where you go into the property and you just want to turn around and walk away. This was one of those properties. However, when you potentially are going to get a listing, you find a way to make it through that door. But it was very cluttered. It was the odor alone, the cigarette smell was. It was a lot. I even had one agent with the smell. He thought there were pets in the home. There were no pets in the home, but it was a very strong odor in the home. It was very dirty. It had layers and layers of dirt. And when I say that, I'm talking about from the kitchen to the bathroom. Something as simple as the bathroom may look like it has mold and mildew and things like that. Not always the case. You pull out that old caulking, and sometimes that caulk just doesn't look very nice. But pull that out and putting new caulking makes a tremendous difference. But it was just layers of dirt that hadn't been tended to, even like on the walls. The walls were dirty. And the dirt wasn't, it was textured, if I might say. There was dust and dirt on the wall. So the walls had to be cleaned before the house was painted. So it's just all the measures we took to, number one, I couldn't see the home and even determine the potential value because I couldn't even see the home. So in order to, to kind of entice them with, hey, you could get more if I could see more, they really put forth the effort, whether it was volunteers and family, to clear out the property. After that, I had to reassess the property. And that's when I saw the layers of dirt, still clutter and things like that. Replacing the carpet was tremendous. I recommended painting the whole house. You might recommend a client paint a room. If they paint a room, your doors and your baseboards, your window trim now looks, it's not very pleasant. It's almost more of an eyesore, I think. But again, we had to clean the walls, paint the entire house, new carpet on the top 2 floors, and it made a tremendous difference. But there was a lot of clutter, a lot of trash out back, under the deck, things like that. And it was most important to try to get as much of that out of the property as we could. I'm sure there's some foreclosures where I've shown homes with tenants in it that look that way. And this was a situation where the tenant was actually a family member. So it looked very overwhelming. However, we just took it step by step, from the clutter to we hired people to come in and clean it, in addition to them cleaning the walls and things themselves. So the little effort that they put in made a huge difference in being able to get them more than what they wanted for the property.
Excellent. So when we talk about being full service, you hear Angela talking about going step by step. Darlene, I see your hand. You have a question. I want to share just a couple of pieces that we can pull from what Angela's saying, then we'll go to your question. You hear Angela talking about going step by step, talking about the clutter, so decluttering. Then you hear her talking about, the carpet, so new carpet. Then you hear her talking about paint. You hear her talking about wiping down the walls. You hear her talking about, deodorizing and cleaning the carpet. You hear all of these different steps that were necessary to take in the listing process. And the end result was multiple offers. right? You heard her say that she advised the clients to wait and give a little bit of a buffer time between the time that they finished it until the time of list to allow for that odor to dissipate. And of course, our clients don't always take our counsel, but in that regard, Angela still was able to get the property to a point where she got multiple offers, went under contract in only a weekend. So Darlene, I see your hand first, and then Dee, I see your hand as well. Go ahead, Darlene, unmute yourself.
Okay, so I have this estate sale coming, right? It's probably not going to be decluttered, but it also has a lot of valuable stuff inside of it. So I don't know what I'm supposed what to do, because it's a mess. Remember, I talked to you about it, Angela. It's a mess. So it's like standing in a room where you have to clean up your house, and it's like you go in a circle. It's like you don't know where to start first.
Can I say something? So I've had properties that have been estate sales. You know, in this case, it might have been a friend of a family or something like that. I don't know whether other realtors do it. I'll do it, or I'll have someone come and do it, even if it's at if it's not too pricey, a low cost for myself, if it's going to help me to sell the home. Because I feel like if I put a property on the home in that condition, it's going to sit on the property. I don't want any of my listings sitting on the property. And I know that there's sometimes we can't do anything about that. But I think what I would do with my seller, if they did do that, kind of like with this one in Lorton, Virginia, is I would prepare them for, if you leave it in this condition, you know, to give them, I usually give my sellers a range anyway. If you leave it in this condition, we're more than likely going to have to list it, and you're lucky if you get it at that price. The small things that you can do just to declutter, even the outside, even if you don't do the inside, will at least someone want to get out of their car and to see the property. But I would break those things down to see, well, what are you willing to do? Because sometimes if finances is their issue, they may have to get down and dirty a little bit and clean some things out themselves. If they're not willing to do it, I've done it. I can tell you, this house in Lorton, I wasn't very pleased with the housekeeper and how they cleaned it. Don't blame them, because I don't think they knew what they were in store for. I cleaned that kitchen. The house is gorgeous. I can tell you, I cleaned the kitchen and I made sure it presented itself, because it was the first thing you saw when you came in the door. It took me 2 hours clean this kitchen, but that's what I was willing to do. It didn't cost my client. I'm sure it will get me so many more referrals because I was in there doing it. But 2 hours of my time allowed me to present a home that I'm proud of, and it's not even my property. So I would break down the steps, find out what your client's willing to do, and the no cost options first before you even go into your pocket if you're going to consider spending something on your own.
All right, Dee, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I see your hand. You have a question, and then Kerman.
So I had two comments. One was I was wondering, Angela, if the clients knew about Kills as a paint to use for getting rid of odor and stains and such like that. So that was one question.
Yes.
And then I had another. Okay, so you did go through that process.
Well, I mean, that's a great product and it's worked for many of my clients. This was new for me, to have a house that smelled like there were lots of pets there and there were no pets there. There was a heavy cigarette smell. And, you know, we use products from like when homes catch on fire to
Right.
moving mildew smells to cigarette smells. And those things work most of the time. They don't guarantee 100%, you know, effective. However, it did help. Every step we did improved. It made an improvement. It's we could have stopped and said, oh, we have a level 5 level of cigarette smoke versus I want it down to a 0. So the more I get rid of that smell, we got to the point where the upstairs smelled perfect. It smelled great. There was no masking any odor. It was corrected on the upper level. Downstairs was fine. The main level was terrible. We finally got the main level done, and then the basement, I invite shampoo the rug if you're not going to replace it. Now I have a whole nother odor we're dealing with 4 days before we go to closing because it didn't dry properly. After 5 days of it drying, smell is nearly gone.
Right.
They did not want to wait to list the property. Had we listed it this week, I mean, I had back-to-back showings, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wasn't pleased. Others were. After it went under contract, people calling, right when it was about to go on contract. So there were a lot of people who were interested in moving forward. Some people drag their feet. So in this market, don't drag your feet, put an offer on it, and then explain to your buyers even, these are some of the solutions. Like, I feel so knowledgeable in reducing odor that I can share all those things that we did with you guys. And that would have corrected pet odor, cigarette smoke sometimes get into the walls. If
Right.
there is an odor in this house, I still have suggestions for the new owners. It's not really, my responsibility at this point, but I do believe that one or two more things and that smell will be 100% gone.
Right. So
So
full
some of the
service.
products do work. In this situation, they cleaned the walls, painted the walls, and I still have an issue.
Oh.
So they're, cleaning the decks would have been another option. But at what point do you exhaust all your financial resources and you can't do anything else? But it wasn't, it was still semi-pleasant when you walked in. It's just, it would dissipate. And then we finally, at the end, while it was on the market, I'm still in there trying to get rid of this odor. Because until I have a contract, I'm still working on. So yeah, I went back out to the property when the showings were done and ran this machine, and I did all these things, overnight to try to get rid of that smell. And they were very happy with their offer. They had more than what they wanted.
Great. So that was
Kills is great.
Yeah, that's spelled KILZ for anybody who doesn't know about it.
Yes, excellent.
The other question that I had for Darlene was personally, or comment personally, like Angela, I'm one of those people who will get in and what do you call it, roll up your shirt sleeves and get in there and try to get it done. I work with an organizer, and I have estate sale people that I work with as well. So, of course you have to consult with your client with this kind of information, but whenever those kinds of things come up, I consult with those folks that I know who do this for a living and get, steps that I can do or get or refer them to the client so that they can hear some more information and we can figure out what we can do for the least amount of money. So there are things that you can do, and an organizer really helps you to once you look at it, once they look at it, they can really help you figure out what the steps are, and you can either do that with your client or you can do it yourself to figure out what you want, what advice you would like to give so that you can get started on the process. It's always good to have another set of eyes on it so you're not doing that spin thing, because I did that for 6 months and I finally said, let me just call an organizer.
No, and actually, I'm definitely one of those people. I'm definitely a hands-on type of person, but I'm also squeamish.
Oh yeah. Well, you wear gloves, you wear masks, all that stuff, and they will tell you what to do.
I don't know what's under all that stuff. This person was a hoarder.
Oh, that's a different animal, but you still can go to a professional and ask them.
Oh, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll get that information from you.
Okay.
Herman, I see that you have a question there.
Yeah, and I really want.
Hello?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to thank Angela, first of all, because it makes me feel like I'm not alone, because I'm dealing with something like the same thing. Just to give you a quick background, had a client who is a friend of the family. She was a very good friend of my mom before my mom passed. And so I was trying to help her sell her condo. And so when we got there, the first thing that we had to discover was the condo needed a lot of work, and it was dark in there. So I really couldn't see how much work it needed. So once all the light came on, I mean, it was like, oh my goodness. So the problem that we had was she had very limited funds. She had no money. She kept telling me, I don't have the money to do this. And I was telling her, I said, we need to paint. We need to get a new stove. We need to do carpet. Her HVAC is gone. She needed to be professionally clean. She has no money. So we worked, long story short, we were able to get the stove done. We were able to get the painting. I explained to her, because I gave her some people that she could maybe call to do the painting. I explained to her, and a lot of times you get what you pay for. And what happened was she chose the least price, and she got a least price paint job. Okay, so it's not the greatest paint job. It's not the person that was referred to me by Mr. Porter. I went with, for my house, I went with Mr. Porter's guy. She didn't do that. So that was the case. Then with the carpet, I told her, I said, you either need to exchange the carpet. She couldn't do it. That was out of the question. I said, you have to get it clean. I gave her someone that would do a great job. She went with the cheapest person, $99 cleaning, and that's what she got. So the carpet is still dirty. Okay. So when you walk in, you can see the high traffic areas. I told her about getting it clean. She asked her neighbor to do it. She got a neighbor's job. The neighbor came in, the neighbor left out, and the place still looked like it did. So I was over there cleaning. I'm talking to Mr. Porter. I'm cleaning, I'm vacuuming, I'm doing all this kind of stuff. So long story short, we get all of that stuff, a lot of that stuff squared away, but she can't do the HVAC. The HVAC doesn't work. Mrs. Porter gave me some insights on what we could do as far as the warranty. Come to find out, Ms. Porter, that's not going to work. And I'll tell you why later. And then, so we still have this issue, and she still wants to be able to put it on the market. The house is completely cleaned out, but she wants to be able to put it on the market and be able to recoup and, make some money off of it. And I'm trying to explain to her, because it's a condo and because it's a 1-bedroom condo, there's not a lot of interest in 1 bedrooms as much as there's in 2 and 3, of course. So I'm trying to explain to her that she's not going to be able to get the monies that she wants, even though we're going to try to do it through my house Porter. I'm trying to do everything I can. And I really don't know what to do at this point, because I'm looking at what the CMA and all of that is showing me, and everything is showing me that she's not going to get, and she still owes money on the condo. She has to, whatever she gets, she's going to have to use some of it to pay off what she owes and all of that. So it's not as bad as yours, Angela, for sure. Thankfully, it's completely cleared out, but because it's such a small, price from the get-go, I'm just trying to figure out what I can do now to try to get everything completed. And it still needs some work. I was in there cleaning. I was rolling up my sleeve. I'm putting elbow grease and stuff to it. And it still needs some work to get everything done. So if anyone had any ideas that they can kind of tell me about, I'd appreciate it, because it doesn't look like it's going to be able to sell for what she would like to be able to get some kind of, to make us some kind of profit. And I'm leery about doing it as is, and I know that there might be an investor that might be able to go in there and see, with the investor's eye, see what it could be and be willing to put some money into it. But I don't know.
So, Kermon, it's funny you say that. My clients for this property in Virginia were similar. They didn't want to spend a lot of money, and they utilize resources. I have family members who were involved, but they did the same thing. They didn't go with my carpet guy. Would have gotten every stain almost, I believe, out of the carpet based on what I could see. They didn't want to go with him. They went with the $100 Sears or something like that, and which is why we had.
That's exactly what mine was, $100 Sears. That's what it was. I didn't want to say, but that's what it was.
Well, I'm saying it because it's important for all of us to know.
Yeah.
But they went with Sears, $100, and it created more of an issue for us. My guy was willing to do it for $200, and he discounted it for $200. She didn't want to go with it. Had I known before, I would have made up the difference had I known. And that's not something that we should have to do. I don't know that I would even recommend doing that, but same with the people who clean the property. I had a person who would do all that I needed them to do. And what I learned from this is I would spend more time, just like I did with the comps, and saying, here's your range based on the condition of your home. This is where we're going to list it at the lower range. And it's more of an incentive for them. I'm not going to every listing, and I'm not going to do this. So to show them based on what they're willing to do in their efforts, this is how much you're going to get for your property, because we can't fix every property. Mm-hmm. And then if you're able to invest $1,000, I could turn over possibly 10,000 or more. When I started pulling those numbers out and showing them, I never guaranteed anything, but I showed them homes that were comparable to if they did these things, how much more they could get. That was enough incentive for them to figure some things out. So I appreciate a person who came out and cleaned for half of what I recommended. It made it so that I could come in there and even assist. I wasn't willing to do any of those things had they not, brought in their discounted carpet cleaner and their discounted maid service. I would have never walked into that home to do any of these things. So it bridged a gap. But at the same time, I think what I learned is that I don't have to come in here and do all of these things. My job is to educate them, show them, if you're able to do these things, because everyone's not able. And sometimes we're not able to do them either. So I think it's more to just put the information in front of them and be prepared to have some listings that aren't a 10 and price them accordingly and move on. That's what I would recommend.
So I have another comment, if I may, Miss Jasmine. I have another comment about that, which is during one of my listings, one of the things that I learned was that there was a company that would actually, and they're not all great, but that would actually do the work and then wait to be paid till settlement. And so if you do that, then they don't have to come out of pocket and they can get a higher price because at least the work is done, and the work is done probably better than the discount. And I've used Stanley Steamer, which is $100, and I've gotten a better result with Stanley Steamer than your regular. They'll go over those stains a lot. But those are the two things that I had learned when I was two different listings that I had that I was working on, and found out about this company that does that. I wasn't always happy with what they did, but the other thing was I stayed on top of them to make sure that I got something that was, pretty much what you would expect to see on the market, so that it wasn't just done haphazardly. So they did a couple of things I was like, no, that's not going to work. And they came back and they did it again and they didn't charge more. So, you can do that. And then your client doesn't have to come out of pocket and they still get that extra boost that they need to do that work. That happens once they get that kind of work done. So if you can find a company like that, I would suggest that. It worked. It did work for me. Work well for my client. Let's put it that way.
Thank you for that recommendation, V. Guys, I hear a theme here, and that's all of us putting in elbow grease. And sometimes we have to do it. I do want to caution us, however, when it comes to us expending our own resources that are not a commission based, in a sense, with regards to us paying for services and all of these things to get the property ready. That is not necessarily what we're supposed to do. What we're supposed to do is get an approval from the seller for a specified amount and a specified contract. We can arrange it on their behalf so that it's done, and the invoice is either supposed to go to the seller to pay for now or at settlement. And if there is something that you pay for in advance, you need to have an express written agreement from the seller that seller is going to reimburse you for it. Okay, I want to make sure that you guys are committing your resources to, everything you need to do for your pipeline, getting more listings and all of those things. But I don't want you at a loss for out-of-pocket expenses that are the sellers to pay.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Excellent. So some things that pertain to your marketing aspects, those are normal expenses that we would pay to market listings. So we're paying for, all of our photographs and all of those things. Those are normal. Anything outside of that, you want to get, an expressed written agreement from the seller that they will reimburse you for it. And then we're going to even start adding some language to our listing agreement that specifies if by chance those marketing endeavors and expenses have been incurred up front, that if the seller cancels your listing agreement before settlement, that the seller is going to be willing to reimburse you for the expenses you paid. We want to make sure that we're walking forward wisely. You do sometimes need to pull up your sleeves and have some elbow grease in there. And we've had to do quite a bit to get listings ready, because at the end of the day, it's going to be a benefit to your seller. It's going to be a benefit to you. It's going to make the buyer happy, but you got to make sure that we're doing so wisely and we have those commitments up front. So kudos. I heard, Angela, there's something that you said that you showed your seller. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, these are what the properties look like that have sold in this price point, right? And that's the advantage that we have with using, depending on the platform you use. In Bright, you can do it because you can just click through the pictures and show them. For those who are using HomeSnap, it prints out the actual photos of the property as well. So you always want to give your client a real feel for where their property stacks up against the competition, right? There's always going to be high, median, and low values, average values. We want to make sure that our clients know, hey, if your property has all the bells and whistles and it's in tip-top shape, that's when your property is going to be comparable with these high values. If your property is in disrepair, that's when it's going to be comparable with these low end values. If it's in average condition, that's when it's going to be comparable with these average values. And I say that because it's very important to set the proper expectations in advance, because to a seller, every seller's property is worth the most on the market, right? Of course it is. To the seller, what are you talking about? You know, the kitchen is only 30 years old. Why would you say that I need to do something different in order to get, you know, the highest market value for my property? My next door neighbor's home sold for $750. My home has the same square footage as theirs. My kitchen's only 30 years old. The floor only has a couple holes in it, but I should still be able to get the highest value for my property. And I'm saying that because we all know that sellers, to them, it's their home. It has such an emotional element to it. So it's not going to be an objective perspective of the house. It's going to be an emotional perspective of what it is worth to them and what it should be worth in their eyes. So we've got to bring things into objectivity there, right? We've even had sellers whereby you'll need to schedule some showings with your sellers. If your seller has a very unrealistic expectation of what their property value is, after you have shown them the photos and you've shown them the values, no problem, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, let's go ahead and schedule some property tours for you on Tuesday from 12 until 2. We'll be visiting these homes. And you take them, the properties, well, the price point that seller wants to list their property in, you take them to see those homes in that price point, and you let them see how they present. You take notes, you talk through them, you point out elements, and you let them see exactly how their property stacks up against it. If there are properties that are in the lower end, you take them to see those as well. And that is a strategy so that your seller can see objectively where their property falls in line, right? Some sellers are going to listen to you based on your market analysis. That's why you want to have, you know, as many comps as possible. 5 is great. 3 is a minimum. If you can get 5 good comps, that's a very objective, you know, position. You want to make sure that the seller knows this, right? If you have a difficult seller, we have 3 different systems that we can run comps on. And this is for your more difficult sellers. Everybody is not going to be difficult. But so, for some of them, you may need to do a CMA from Bright, HomeSnap, if you had to do it from RPR, because some people are going to think that their property is worth much more than it really is. So these are just some suggestions and tools for you in your objection handling. So where you're trying to get a difficult seller to see an objective view of their property from the perspective of the market, because the market has a voice, right? There's probably no doubt, and just like Angela said, with all the showings that she had in such a short period of time, we're excited that we got multiple offers. But I believe exactly like she said, had that odor not been there and had the sellers allowed the time for it to dissipate, they would have had even more offers. And the more offers would have equated to more competition and a higher price point. So let's do everything that we can to inform our sellers, educate them in advance. And for those that are unwilling to look at it from the perspective of the report, no problem, take them to see those homes.
Jasmine, I wanted to add something. When I first met with these sellers, you know, I gave them a price based on the comps. And that that still was a little bit of a reach. This is what your home could sell for. The work that they did, after they did the work, I wasn't even going to change. I actually increased the price, but I wasn't going to, after they cleaned it out and did some of the work, you know, I assured them that we were still going to list at the lower price, regardless of what they did. Their efforts were going to help me. My goal was to get more buyers, more qualified buyers in there. Their efforts were not done to increase the price. It was done to show better so that I could get them the price we originally talked about a month ago. So at first they were a little shocked. You mean you're not going to raise the price? And I said, well, the buyers are going to determine the price, whether we list it at this amount or this amount. So we raised the price and we got them more than what they wanted, and an incredible offer based on how it presented itself with basically no contingencies, which is unreal, because if the home was presented the way I first saw it, it would still be on the market. I don't think people would have gone in there. And the funny thing is, you know, we have with Showing Time, we have this feedback. If you have a property on the market and your seller's not willing to do anything or unable to, you know, rely on that feedback, price it accordingly. You'll get a lot of traffic in there, but maybe the day one, you take the feedback back to your seller and say, hey, this is the feedback we're getting. You know, if we're going to even get what you've listed it for, you can still make these improvements, because the sellers who saw it day one got an odor that day two wasn't there. And the feedback, you know, scale from 1 to 10, I got like 1. This is the worst listing I've ever you know, seen. And it was pretty harsh. And then in the same day, I was getting offers. I mean, I'm sorry, feedback that was quite nice. And I discussed this with Jasmine. You know, we were saying that every house isn't for everyone. We've gone into homes that aren't in this type of condition, and you get good feedback, you get bad feedback. Maybe there's some outdated things versus, maybe cleanliness. But in this case, feedback is another tool you can use to influence your seller to improve the property, even if it's a no cost improvement, while it is still on the market. Every day we all worked to make sure the home presented itself until closing. That was our commitment. So, you know, that feedback is valuable. And another thing I was going to suggest, I don't think it would hurt to reach out to, you know, Realty pros and say, hey, I have this listing. I think we can get feedback from our colleagues that may also help to influence your seller as well.
Excellent pointers there, Angela. For anybody who has not used the reports and the system that you're talking about, talk about it a little bit more with regards to the feedback that you're talking about. Where is that found? How do we derive it? How do we send it to our sellers? Where do people leave it?
Okay, so I think you may have to add to this because I don't probably utilize everything that I have access to. But, you know, when I put the listing in the MLS, it prompts you to set the showing, you know, to set up your the showing time in order to show your property. I believe that HomeSnap has a way to share that feedback as well, which I have not utilized. Jasmine, you can, elaborate on that. But basically, you have a set of questions that automatically will be sent to all of your showing agents. And it's sent immediately. You should know this, especially if you're working with buyers, because the moment you show a property, you receive this email saying, can we have feedback? When you're on the listing side, you rely on that feedback. And whether someone automatically sends it or not, I usually will follow up. They'll automatically get that message 2 and 3 times. On the showing side, you'll see that. But when you're showing properties, even provide that feedback, because once you're on the listing side, you see how valuable it is. If they're not responsive, call them up and then just get that feedback verbally if necessary. But it's listed. They give you the set of questions they want to ask. If I'm not mistaken, I believe you can change the questions. If you have a property where you think it shows great on the inside, but the basement is whatever, if you want specific feedback, you can request what type of feedback you want if you think it's going to benefit your seller.
So kudos there, Angela. She's talking about in Showing Time, guys, your reports. So as a listing agent, like Angela said, when you set up your listing, you connect it to Showing Time so that agents are able to schedule their tours very easily through that system. And yes, it will send them automatic notifications to provide you with feedback. Now, on the listing side, you go in through that channel and you're able to go into your listing and view the reports. And from the reports aspect, it shows you every agent who showed your property, how many tours you've gotten, how many people have submitted feedback, what that feedback is, what the listing is from a scale to 5 to 10, if it's overpriced, if it shows well, and all of these things. And allows you to give a one click of a button to send that report over to your seller. Now, your seller is able to see the full report from an objective position directly from the agents and the buyers who toured the property. So it's a very useful and insightful tool. And we want to do that for all of our listings. You want to continuously send them out that report whenever the property is in an active stage on the market, because it's giving them the market updates. They know what people are saying about it. Okay, so kudos there, Angela. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts, or insight? All right. Well, what I will say, go ahead. Sure.
I was just gonna say, and I think I said it earlier, but just to kind of reiterate, if we get these properties that need work, it's okay. I had a hard time listing the property without these things being done or these improvements, but it's okay to list them. And I think Kerman said, oh, I know this person. Well, I kind of knew this person too, and that might have been why I put forth a little more effort. But I don't want to really make this a habit. I want to have a set standard way of how I want everyone to be, I want to be consistent across the board. And it's okay to have a listing that's outdated or that needs some work. You just price it accordingly and be okay with that. That's what I'm learning from this experience.
Definitely. There's another aspect that you can add too. In the event that the seller is willing to make the needed, upgrades, updates, repairs, or, refreshments to the property, then great. If not, then the seller can always offer a credit. So like Angela was saying, there's some things that they can do that are, very minimal expenses, little to no money out of pocket. But if they would rather provide a credit, then you price it accordingly. The most important aspect is for them to know, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, with your property and the condition that it's in now, this is the price range that you'll likely receive an offer at. If your property was in this condition, then that's the price range that you would receive an offer. And so what are your goals, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? Because it's really going to depend on what that seller's goals are, what their financial net the desire is, what their timeline is, how much elbow grease, if you will, they're willing to put into the property. So you're going to notice with different types of sales, such as the one that Darlene was talking about earlier, and we'll have further conversation about that. Some people, if they just have an inherited property, it's an estate sale or something like that, some of those people are not willing to put in the elbow grease that's necessary, right? Another thing to consider is what is the overall condition of the property from the perspective of whether it's health, safety, disrepair, and the like. Because a property that is just in a state of needing a very deep clean and a very deep deodorizer, that's a totally different property than one that has, cracks in the foundation and mold and, holes in the roof and all of those things. So one that needs that, that intensive cleaning, that's going to be one that is a lot better suited for you to put that investment of time into, because at the end of the day, once you've done that, then you're able to command a certain market with regards to that. But if it's that same property and it has mold and it has holes in the ceiling and it has cracks in the foundation, that is not going to be the property that you're going to put that type of elbow grease into, because even at the end of the day, once you do, it's still going to be, bound to a certain price point because of the costly repairs that are necessary in order to get that property up to speed. So that's a part of our evaluation process. You go into the property and say, okay, what can my seller do either for the least or most cost-effective price in order to maximize their return on investment? If the things that they need to do are so costly, like they absolutely have to replace the roof. There's black mold in the basement. This part of the house is flooding. You know what I mean? There are leaks from the ceiling, or, something is falling out. That is a totally different conversation in and of itself. Okay, so be aware that depending on the condition of the property, that's what's going to determine for you whether it's worth it for you to invest that type of time in putting in the sweat equity to do the things that we've talked about doing on today's call. Okay, but have a express consent from your seller to do anything that it is that you see that needs to be done. Send it to them in writing what your recommendations are, get their approval in writing. If there are any price points that it is that they're agreeing to, get those in writing as well. We can absolutely coordinate things on our sellers' behalf, and we've done that for many of our higher price listings. We just kind of coordinate everything for them. So it's kind of, you know, they pass the baton and we do it for them. So coordinating everything from hauling, having, you know, the junk removed, the, you know, this having storage come by. We even have hire helpers where they can come by and box things up and put them into a pod or something like that. We have people that come by and do the painting, cleaning, carpet, and all of those things. If you have a seller client that is willing to do those things, or whatever items they are willing to allow for you to coordinate on their behalf, you just want to have express written consent for them to do those things and to have to pay for those things. Okay. As a realty pro, if there is anything that you pay for without your seller's knowledge, without your seller's expressed, you know, consent, or them requesting to, expect that that is something that you may not be reimbursed for. Okay. So that's why I want for you guys to have those conversations in advance, because we want to protect your investment of, you know, assets into any property, because you're in this business to make money, not to lose money or to have something that you don't get reimbursed for. So let's have those conversations, get those agreements, you know, hold those sellers accountable for whatever their goals are, whether it's to get the maximum amount on the property or whether it's to just offload the property as quickly as possible, because your sellers are going to have different goals. And as you can see, Angela's seller was very motivated to get more money for the property. So her showing them what they could likely get if they took the recommendations that she was given, that was motivation enough for them to, you know, haul everybody in, you know, from the household and say, hey, listen, we need you to do this, you know, whether it's a tenant, family members, friends, or whomever, they were able to do what was necessary to get the property to where Angela recommended that they would have a successful sale. So hats off to you and kudos for facilitating that. I wish you had the photos so that you could show people the after photos. I know that you didn't take many of them before because they weren't as flattering, but I've seen the after photos, guys, and Angela did a great job. I'm very proud of her. The property was light years different from beginning until end. So kudos on that. All right. Does anybody have any other questions, comments, insight before we begin to wrap up for today?
I did have a question that is a different kind of challenge when you're dealing with buyers, sellers. And I think it might be helpful at one point for us to talk about the emotional side. I had a real interesting experience with folks who were at first interested in renting and then decided to divorce. And so the whole situation changed. So I would just like to work through scenarios where we have emotional issues that we have to deal with our clients, and how do we handle that? Because we're not professional counselors. We're not necessarily friends of the clients. And, you know, what lines do you cross and what lines do you not? You know, how much do you share? Who is your actual client? If you've got a relationship, you know, if you have a relationship with two people or three people who are doing who are trying to make a purchase or make a sale, and folks don't agree. Because I mean, one of the first things that we say is, who else is responsible for this property? When we get ready to buy, when we get ready to list, one of the first things we say is, who else? Are you the only one? And I would love for us to go through scenarios where things sort of kind of fall apart, get back together, what have you, because those things happen too.
All right, so that'll be for later conversation. Just as a point of encouragement, right offhand, if you have a client, you know, husband and wife client or whomever, whatever clients that own a property together, because sometimes you have sisters, sometimes you have best friends, sometimes you have people that aren't espoused to each other, but, you know, own the property in some type of way together. All of them are your clients. Anybody who has ownership in that property, you need all of their signatures in order to move forward. and your communication has to be with all of them as well. There can't be a point person that you rely on to disseminate information around the bunch. You owe equal fiduciary to everybody who owns that property because you work for all of them. And you want to make sure that your communication is consistent across the board. Anything that you share with one via text, via, email, phone call, you've got to share that same information with all of them. And the perspective is a very objective one. I would say about 90% of the time in our transactions, you have an emotional buyer or seller. So that is a normal part of our real estate transaction. What we do when we sit with them in advance at their buyer consultation or their listing consultation, of course, we're presenting information for their insight, but we're also gathering information. We're asking questions and we're finding out what their motivation is. What are your goals? What are you looking forward to? Because that's what you're going to use to remind them of why they hired you in the first place, right? So when they're emotional, your job is to be sober-minded and your job is to be objective and to be thorough and guide them to the finish line, period. It's not to get emotionally involved in anything that's going on. No matter what it is, they hired you to be professional. So the emotional aspect of going back and forth and allowing it to make you, emotionally fall apart, or however you would describe that in the midst of it, we've got to make sure that we put on that hat as the professional, and we're guiding people through whatever it is that's going on. So even if they're blinded by what's going on, you have to be that sober-minded professional that stays focused on the goal, and you guide them through to settlement.
So I'm talking about when they come to you and they have one mind, and then during the course of the transaction, then you get 3 different opinions. So that's the kind of thing that I would like to talk about at some point, but not now. Like if you have a mother and children, or a father and children, or if you have, like spouses or unrelated individuals who have decided to do something, and then somebody decides something else. You're responsible to all of them. You want to get them across the finish line. I'd love to hear some cases where what people worked through and how they did it to get folks to be on the same page.
So in short, what I shared is the solution, your preparation in advance, what you're talking about at that buyer consultation or that listing appointment, the questions that you're asking, finding out who the parties are to the transaction, what their goals and motivations are, why they're selling in the first place, or why they're purchasing. If there is anybody else who will have a say so and who that is, and having all parties to get in agreement before you even put a plan of action in place. That's going to be the most helpful and useful piece to you, because yes, once you start working with them, they are all your clients, and you want to make sure that you regard them as such. Okay. That was very thought-provoking, Dee. I'm looking forward to having a Realty Talks where we're talking about some situations like that. So for now, we are a couple minutes after 1:30, and I do want to end to let you guys go for the day. If anybody has any last minute maybe thoughts you can share, otherwise I am ending the recording.